Okay, let's do it.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Friday FARcast. I'm Robert Phoenix. How the heck is everybody out there today? As America swelters, the world swelters, apparently it's quite hot, not only here in North America, but also in England and in places throughout Europe. It got to about 125, I believe, in Phoenix the other day. I can't even imagine that. And you say, oh, yeah, it was 124, but it's dry heat. 125, I don't care if it's dry heat. Things melt at 125. If you get on pavement, asphalt, blacktop, you're probably increasing that heat by about 25 degrees, 30 degrees. You're around 160. You could fry an egg. Theoretically, you could even have soles on your tennis shoes melt if you stay in one place for too long. That's how hot it is. Anyway, I hope everybody's staying cool and hydrated out there as we continue our journey through the Matrix and how matrixy it's become. Before we get into any of the stuff today that I'm going to be talking about, which is going to be mostly about false flags, I just want to take some time out here again to thank some people who have been really helpful and kind and have contributed and donated to the show. First of all, I want to thank Judy here in Texas. I want to thank Richard, who has donated as well. Let's see, who else do we have here? Let me just get into a few other names here. Hold on a second. I want to thank Sharon for donating. Just a nice shout out there. Let's see. Hang with me. Got a lot of people to sort through here, which is good. I mean, it's good to be able to have to sort through a number of different names. Let me just go here. Hold on 1 second. Okay, let's see, who else do I want to thank? Jolene, thank you for donating. Really appreciate that. That's really kind. And let's see, who else do we have here? Julie, thank you for the donation as well. And I'll get to some more by the end of the show because I want to get on with the show. But I just want to let you know that it is greatly appreciated. Really appreciate it. So I wanted to talk about false flags today, and the reason why I'm bringing it up is because right now what we're seeing in the press is this. Well, there's two reasons why I want to bring this up. One is because of how false flags are being weaponized. That's number one. And number two, they speak to the plastic film of our reality. And I'll get into a little bit of that as we sort of go down the rabbit hole here. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because there's this connection between Alex Jones and Sandy Hook and Trump. Now, there was never any real energy or push from the mainstream media to go after Sandy Hook people or Sandy Hook deniers. before Trump became president. I mean, there may have been some, but it's not like, okay, let's look at this, let's look at the people that believe in this, let's move it forward so that we can exhume it and then use it against people that are trying to untangle the nature of the Matrix reality, or surreality for that matter. And again, the most recent kind of example of this is what's going on with Alex Jones and Trump and Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly specifically went there to ask him about Sandy Hook, and it's kind of backfired on Megyn Kelly in a huge way. She was given this big contract and a new platform with NBC, and she was supposed to have these really hard-hitting interviews. The first one with Putin fell flat on his face because there's no way that Megyn Kelly can get into Vladimir Putin's head. The guy may not even be human. You know, he may be a really sophisticated robotoid, and she may not be. She can't get into his head and try to get him to look stupid or foolish. And it didn't work. You know, it became a 15-minute segment. If there had been really good content, trust me, he was probably there for close to 2 hours with the interview. Probably took a break, came back. If they had compelling content, they would have shown it. Instead, it was a 15-minute interview. How often you sit down with Vladimir Putin and get 15 minutes out of it? It's generally because the mission was aborted and failed. So she tees up Alex Jones. And he's got all the videotape, you know, the watchers were watching the watchers who were watching the watchers. It's become a panoptical society. Everybody's watching each other now. Am I right? I remember a long time ago when I did an interview with Kevin Kelly of Wired magazine. And Kevin was an interesting guy. He was a very smart guy. I don't know if he's still around. I think he might be, but we were talking about this whole notion of privacy. This is back in 2000, I think, in right around then. And, of course, you know, coming out of the 1960s and not wanting to share my information and privacy is a sacred domain and all that stuff, I was, you know, perhaps a little naive in the presence of Kevin Kelly, who knew that, you know, where we were going was a society where there was going to be very little privacy. And he said, so I asked him about it, and he says, well, as long as we can watch the watchers. I'm like, well, okay. You know, who's going to have the better intel? Who's going to have the better surveillance? And so what we're doing through YouTube, through blogs, through podcasts, we're essentially watching the watchers. We're trying to turn the mirror back onto that. Like, you see us and we see you. The only problem is they get better intel. And their intel is completely transparent. Our intel is not transparent. Our intel is distorted. And now it is sufficiently distorted. Let me use a metaphor here. If you were to go back about 15 years ago, and an event would take place, like a real event, not something completely and utterly staged. Although one begs to ask the question, what is real? But if you were going to a real event, it was usually the first 20 minutes of the event where there was chaos and the news would flash headlines, crawl. You'd get early reports. Like, for instance, let's go back in time. Let's take Diana, Princess Diana. When Princess Diana got into that accident in the tunnel in France, the first reports were she got out of the car. She got out of the limo. And she was walking and was taken away by an ambulance. And that was the first report. It's like, well, okay, so maybe she didn't get hurt. Or maybe she was hurt, but, she got out, walked out. And then the next thing you know, she's dead. She gets taken to a hospital in France, and then she's dead. There are all the other details about sort of how the accident started and all that stuff get buried. And now what takes place is sort of this mock investigation. There's always a mock investigation. And then there's the retelling of the myth and the aftermath and the kids, and and then those first few details get flushed down the rabbit hole. And that was just one example. And that was at a time when there was kind of less control, to be honest with you. Now when events happen, most of which are staged, those first 20 minutes are completely mapped out so that there's no possibility of any kind of chaos or any kind of distorted information that will seep through the initial part of the event. So what we have now is we have kind of this, airtight narrative, which is scripted out. Unless, of course, something unusual takes place, like what happened with the Orlando shooting, and what was supposed to happen simultaneously on the West Coast in Santa Monica with James Wesley Howell. Now, James Wesley Howell was trained at Quantico along with Omar Mateen and the guy that did the Orlando shooting. And when he heard what had happened, he realized that he was going to be a patsy, and he turned himself in. Now, you weren't going to hear that. I mean, you heard about this guy getting arrested with all these firearms, and that's as much as we heard. That's it. After that, it was radio silence, cone of silence. And now he's in this trial process in Santa Monica, and nobody will write about him. Nobody will talk about him, which is really interesting. All the big, truth people won't touch James Wesley Howell. Alex Jones doesn't talk about him. Jeff Rentz doesn't talk about him. David Icke doesn't talk about him. Jim Fetzer doesn't talk about him. It's like this guy must be just completely radioactive. And there were people that had websites devoted to, hey, let's pop this news, and those websites got taken down. Probably because they were notified or told something that made them really rethink what they were doing. James Wesley Howell could be the skeleton key to all of this. How often does a patsy do something that he's really not supposed to do? Right? They usually wind up dead most of the time. So he broke with the program. And here we have a guy that broke with the program. And I'm sure you can't talk to him. But anyway, now we're in a period where things they're highly scripted, and not only they're highly scripted, but even the mistakes feel like they're written into the script now. Like if they're using multiple people for different events, whether it's Dave Acton, and it's questionable whether Dave Acton is George Webb, although they do look a lot alike. Or a parent from Sandy Hook, or whomever. I think some of this stuff now is done purposefully because it gives us a sense that we are finding something. We're finding the glitch in the matrix. We're finding these, it's sort of like the revenge of the shooter on the grassy knoll. That these people are the reincarnation of the shooter on the grassy knoll. These people are the smoking guns. And so, we're very quick to point out where there's irregularities. And I think some of it is done, quite frankly, on purpose. In some ways, just to drive us mad. In other ways, also to create this debate of, well, this person looks a little like this person, but they don't look, right? Or look at the chin. We do all these facial forensics. And even that, to some degree, almost becomes a parody unto itself. And so here we are, and I'm not saying it's not right or appropriate to do that. I think it actually is. I mean, look at what we did with all the Hillarys. And clearly there were different Hillarys. If you can't see that, then you weren't really looking. There were different Hillarys. There were Hillarys that looked younger. There were Hillarys where the ears were different. There were Hillarys where they were unhealthy and coughing at every single turn. There was the Hillary that came out of Chelsea's apartment. I mean, we went through this during the run-up of the election. And clearly, there were different women involved here. And this is not the first time. You go back to the election where she was actually running against Barack Obama. And even back then, there were rumors that she was being spotted in 2 different places in New York City. So this is nothing new. But we have to wonder if that's even part of the script in its own way. And if so, what is it really showing us? It's a rhetorical question. You can think about it and chime in if you like. I've got a chat room here, by the way, over on Spreaker. If you want to chat in, chime in, ask some questions, we can certainly open some of this stuff up. The reason why I'm talking about this is because of what's going on with this Sandy Hook thing and how they're using it against Trump. Now, Alex Jones said, I never said that nobody died at Sandy Hook. It's unfortunate, but there's a thing called the internet. And there are about 4 examples where Alex Jones has been clearly on the record about what happened. And now that Alex Jones has reached a certain level of popularity, I mean, Alex Jones is mainstream now. Think about that. Alex Jones has catapulted into the mainstream. And this was a guy who about 5-6 years ago was really still kind of underground. And now he's in the mainstream. He's as mainstream as Dan Rather. And Dan Rather's not around anymore, but I'm using him as an example. Think about that just for a moment. Alex Jones is mainstream. For whatever it's worth, with all the warts, all the gatekeeping, all the stuff that's connected to Alex Jones, he is mainstream. He's in the mainstream topic of conversation. And quite often, it's not a really good topic of conversation. The mainstream portrayal of Alex Jones is garbage. And I'm not defending Alex Jones, but that's what is taking place. And so as a result of that, everybody that's associated to some degree with Alex Jones, whether it's you're a truther or you're a conspiracy theorist or you're all conservative, whatever they are, right? However you want to slice and dice it, there's like 6 degrees of separation with Alex Jones. And if you're part of that 6 degrees of separation, in the eyes of the mainstream, you're a pariah. Because that's how Alex Jones is being portrayed. As a pariah. And cruel and insensitive and all the other things that go along with somebody who theoretically does not believe that anybody died. How could you be so insensitive? The same thing going on with Seth Rich. How can you be so insensitive? The same thing going on with Alefantes and David Brock. Oh, how can you be so insensitive? These are guys that are just trying to have a business, trying to, do something good in the community. And because you have gone out on a limb and made these claims, you're a vile human. And there's guilt by association. This is what's happening. And so the whole level of discourse around what's real, what's not real, what's true, what's not true, has become completely tainted. Completely tainted. The waters are murky. And, this all started a couple of days ago when I was on YouTube, and I'm going through all these different YouTubers who are basically on attack mode with each other. And it's like, well, hold on, boys and girls. We're supposed to be united against one thing. And that one thing is the obfuscation of the truth. And of course there's trolls. And of course there are people that are sent in there to blow things up, to appear. They're gatekeepers. There's all kinds of landmines now. In YouTube, in chat rooms, on Reddit. I mean, there's been an infiltration that's taken place. So now, if you're engaged in this unfolding of what we call reality and truth being a part of it, you've got to get your hazmat suit on and wade through a lot of it because it's a cesspool, to be honest with you. And it would be great to have some real unified action, real unified front, real unified purpose And that would be awesome, have all these disparate kinds of people, and if they were vetted, to bring them all under one umbrella, one auspice, and say, okay, we know who you are, you know who you are, we know who we are. Clear. Let's all pool our resources together and create something significant. To me, that's really analogous with the Aquarian Age. That's an Aquarian act, by the way, and not a dark Aquarian act. So again, the reason why I'm going into this is because there's some real discrepancies in terms of Sandy Hook and what happened to the kids and the parents and the teachers. And that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Sandy Hook that day opened at 9:05 in the morning, which school opens at 9:05 in the morning. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Sandy Hook had been abandoned and hadn't had any school there for a couple of years. It was a condemned school. It was filled with asbestos. Those are tangential details. But there was one of the details was there was a boy who apparently was shot in the head. Shot in the head. One bullet shot in the head. And this was the claim of his father. And the claim of Wayne Carver, who is the coroner, and that if you watched Wayne Carver on any of the Sandy Hook YouTubes, you'd scratch your head. It's like, this guy is really, he's a coroner? This guy's involved in forensics? I mean, he seemed like a joke. Anyway, his claim was that all the victims had 3 to 6 bullets. So if one father claims that his child had a bullet to the head and he held him and he was dying in his arms, and the coroner says everybody had 3 to 6 bullets, there's a discrepancy. And the other discrepancy that really grabbed my attention, and I don't know if you've really drilled down into this, there was that one false flag up in Oregon that happened last year where a guy at a community college went in with a gun and supposedly shot some people, which was a bunch of bullshit. And then there was a guy who stopped him, and he was, the hero. It's like, where's he now? What is he doing? And I remember the pictures from his hospital bed where they're joking around, and the guy did not look like he was in any sort of pain. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is you would think that in something like Sandy Hook, there would be maybe one person that might survive. I mean, humans are paradoxical. We're actually, pretty vulnerable and also pretty strong at the same time. I mean, there are stories of people that have 4 or 5 bullets in them, and they live. They miraculously come through for some reason. And at Sandy Hook, there is nobody, theoretically, nobody that survived. Nobody that went into any kind of triage or hospital, and they came out and could be an actual witness to any of this. Look at Orlando. Anybody come out of Orlando as a witness? What happened in San Bernardino? Anybody come out as a witness in San Bernardino? What about in Santa Barbara? Anybody, get shot up and heal and come out as a witness and talk about it? No. No, they're never. And nobody ever recovers and talks about it. And the reason why is because if there was a false flag scenario, and they did theoretically recover, their testimony could be really damaging in terms of sequence of events. They could find holes and flaws in their narrative and their version of the story. And I think we've seen some of that along the way every now and then with the occasional eyewitness, but it's rare when somebody actually, South Carolina, in that church, nobody lived. I mean, you have to think of the ability to kill by these people, that they must all train at the same assassin school or something, because their kill rate is almost 1,000. Think about it. The kill rate is almost 1,000. So there's discrepancies here, huge discrepancies in the probability of what takes place. I think you had maybe a few people from the Boston Marathon that might have survived, whatever. And I think they've been to baseball games and waved their hands and done what they needed to do. But it's rare. It's rare when this happens. Somebody says, this happened, and this guy did this, and da-da-da-da, and there was more than one person there. I mean, I think we have to step back and ask ourselves, with any of these events, if anything ever happened, and we've had scores of them. I mean scores of them. It all seemed to kick off really with what happened with Gabby Giffords in Arizona, which is a whole other weird thing unto itself. Now, theoretically, she survived, and there are some people who believe that it's all an act, and I would not be at all surprised if it is just a complete act, to be honest with you. And then we had a number of events from that point forward. So many. We had the Aurora event. We had what happened in Portland. We had San Bernardino. They were just tick, 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 tick. Just going off. We also had some other events that predated Gabby Giffords. We had, what was his name? Cho, the guy from Virginia. University of Virginia, right? The guy who went nuts. Of course, he had all the poetry and all the hate, and he went nuts. Andres Breivik, he went nuts. We had this whole slew of people who were shooting massive numbers of people. Did they really happen? Did these events really? I know, for instance, with the Breivik event, it was almost impossible for Breivik to be in two places at once, or at least the time that it would take to go from one place to another and open fire on all these kids. That's very interesting. And I think the reason I know the reason I'm talking about it today is because we're trying to kind of understand this sort of fluid nature of reality. Here is the piece that triggered it all. It's on James Fetzer's site, and it has to do with Neil Heslin and how it contradicts the official narrative of Sandy Hook. And this is what Jim writes. A major contradiction in the Sandy Hook narrative emerged during Megyn Kelly's interview with Alex Jones, during which Sandy Hook parent Neil Heslin, who had testified to Congress about the loss of his son Jesse, said that he had held his body with a bullet hole in the head in his arms at the scene. But according to Wayne Carver, MD, medical examiner, who is quoted in the following story from the Newtown Patch, 24 January, none of the parents, 2013, were allowed to come into contact with the children, but were only shown photographs of them because it's easier that way. This is what Carver said. Relatives identified their loved ones not in person but by photos taken of the victims' faces. We did not bring the bodies and families into contact. We took pictures of them, of their facial features. He said it's easier on the families when you do that. There's a time and a place for up close and personal in the grieving process. But to accomplish this, we felt it would be best to do it this way. Moreover, while Carver reported that each kid was shot from 3 to 11 times, Heslin said that Jesse had a bullet through his head, suggesting he was hit only once. Here's the testimony of Heslin during Megyn Kelly's interview with Alex Jones. So he talks about it. Neil Heslin, I lost my son. I buried my son. I held my son with a bullet hole through his head. Megyn Kelly, Neil Heslin's son Jesse, was just 6 years old, was murdered along with 19 of his classmates and 6 adults on December 14th, 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut. I dropped him off at 9:04. That's when we dropped him off at school with his book bag. Hours later, I was picking him up in a body bag. You were picking him up in a body bag. Carver reported that the parents were not brought into contact with their dead children. Haslam claims to have held his son with a bullet hole in his head, in his arms at the scene. They cannot both be telling the truth. In fact, here is ample proof both of them are lying. This is kind of the genesis of it all. And that's when I began to think about, why was anybody not just wounded in all of this? Why aren't they ever wounded? You know what I'm saying? All right, here we go. This is, we're going to get into the false flag formula, which is 15 ways to detect a false flag operation. You ready? Now, this is from Waking Times, and it came out about a year ago. Number 1, false flag formula number 1, drill at the same or nearby time and place. The exercise or drill at the same time at the same place has become the sine non qua, or indispensable element of recent false flag operations. Sometimes there are slight variations on this when the government plans to drill nearby a few miles away rather than at the exact place, or plans to drill earlier on in the day so it can coincidentally go live. There was a twist in the case of the recent San Bernardino shooting. The government planned regular drills in the building where the shooting took place every month. That's right. Absolutely. Think about it. What are the chances of a real mass shooting occurring in a building used for mass shooting drills? Every month they held a drill there. As Captain Eric H. May, former U.S. Army military intelligence officer, stated, the easiest way to carry out a false flag attack is by setting up a military exercise that simulates the very attack you want to carry out. In the case of 9/11, there were no less than 46 drills occurring simultaneously during the event, according to Webster Tarpley, author of Synthetic Media, Made in the USA. In the case of the London 7/7 bombings, Peter Power admitted on radio that he was leading a team who were training for that exact scenario when it unfolded. By the way, there was a big settlement with 7/7, and a guy who was detailing the truth on 7/7, he was taken down and he sued. He sued. I forget. It was either a media company or the British. I think it might have been the British government, and he won. He won a suit because he had significant evidence that stated the 7/7 was a false flag. There were active shooter drills in all the false flags of Sandy Hook, Boston Marathon, Charleston, San Bernardino, the Norway attack, and the second Paris attack of 2015, and many, many more. What's the point of having to drill at the same time at the same place? Here are a few purposes. Distract and remove key personnel who would otherwise be at the scene to contain and investigate it. Confuse other personnel who will treat the whole event in a different way if they think it is a drill rather than a real event. Slow down, reduce, or eliminate an effective response, especially police and other law enforcement, given the removal and confusion of personnel. Distract and confuse witnesses, the media, and the public in general. So this is really interesting that we have a drill and then we have a false flag, or an event that's supposed to be an event. So just think about the nature of reality in that moment. You have something that is artificial, and then you have an openly stated event that clearly is an artificial exercise. So these two layers of reality are both synthetic. And this is what's a challenge, is we're trying to interpret illusion at two separate levels. It's almost like the movie Inception, where they're in a dream and then they drop deeper into the dream. So there are these three levels of reality that go on during a false flag. There's the simulated event, there's the false flag, and then there is the space itself, the neutral space itself, which in and of itself is an event, right? There is processes going on outside of whatever is happening. There's wind blowing, there's trees growing, there's birds that are chirping. There are other things happening in that event, unless they're part of the false flag. I wonder if they have crisis actor birds. They bring in these certain birds at all these different events. Distract and confuse witnesses. The media and the public in general provide great cover in a period of lower defenses and security to carry out an attack, which would otherwise be difficult or impossible if defenses were at their usual or optimal level. Here is a false flag formula number 2, foreknowledge. Another way you can tell that a mass shooting is a false flag op is if you find proof of foreknowledge of the event. As it so happens, all the notorious and publicized mass attacks of late have had evidence of foreknowledge going all the way back in time. There was foreknowledge of the Pearl Harbor attack of 1941 that got the U.S. into World War II, of course. There were many aspects of foreknowledge of 9/11, including the BBC reporting WTC falling before it actually did, and mysterious calls to people like author Salman Rushdie and San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown advising them not to fly to New York City on September 11th. Of course Willie Brown said that. Sandy Hook had blatant foreknowledge with various web pages put up days before the event, as did the Boston Marathon. Of course, Sandy Hook, what did they have? They had the Red Cross stuff. They had web pages that were set up to start to get donations for Sandy Hook. It was all ahead of schedule. False flag formula number 3, eyewitnesses have conflicting accounts. You can also spot a latent false flag operation when you see or hear of multiple conflicting witness accounts. In the case of the Aurora, Colorado Batman mass shooting, eyewitnesses claimed they saw an entire team of shooters, rather than the single shooter, James Holmes, of the official narrative. With Sandy Hook, we saw multiple scenes of law enforcement chasing men in the surrounding forest. Now, I was thinking about that, and I'm wondering, did they do that on purpose? Right? Why are we even being shown that? You know? Why are we being shown these guys running into the forest? It's like, look, see? You know, so in some ways, it sells, again, this sort of tiered layer of reality. Okay, so there's this is terrible. Look what happened. You know, and everybody cries crocodile tears and donates to Sandy Hook, and a couple months later, they show up at the Super Bowl singing. Those kids are singing a song at the Super Bowl. Nobody knows it. And then there's okay, look what happened. You know, they sent in a hit team, and they killed all these kids. And then when you see these guys running through the forest, and again, I don't know how we get that footage, but that seems like one of those intentional leaks now. It's like, okay, yeah, look at that. See, what happened to those guys? And then there's the nothing happened piece. But I'll keep reading here. With Sandy Hook, we saw multiple scenes of law enforcement chasing men into the surrounding forest, yet the official narrative declares only one shooter was Adam Lanza in San Bernardino. 2 witnesses stated they saw 3 white athletic men and not the 2 brown, so white and brown, not the 2 brown husband and wife team we were told did the shooting. They were Muslims. They weren't, I guess they were brown, if you want to get into the Sherwin-Williams description. But there's a discrepancy there. And again, like, did anything really happen? I'm not sure. Conflicting eyewitness accounts can destroy the official narrative, no matter what the detail is. On 9/11, various firemen told us that there were bombs in the building, contradicting the official story that planes alone took down the Twin Towers. With Sandy Hook, Gene Rosen's testimony itself was full of holes. It was contradicted by that of the school bus driver in the official report. Gene Rosen! I can think about when those kids and how they would never be the same again. And I invited them into my house where I have 200 stuffed animals. And I have a bunch of stuffed animal costumes that I get into myself. And I decided to make the kids feel better, and I got into a bunny costume because I didn't want them to feel, sad. And then I gave them all carrots and chocolate milk. Sorry. Gene Rosen. Where's Gene Rosen these days? Somebody should go find Gene Rosen. I swear, if I lived within 100 miles of that area, I'd be all over that place. False life formula number 4. Quickly name and demonize the patsy. Have you ever wondered how quickly the MSM discovers the name of the patsy? They had somehow deduced that Osama bin Laden was responsible for 9/11 just hours after the attacks. Have you ever wondered why the government is so good at telling us who supposedly executed these attacks right after they happened, with almost no time to investigate, yet can't seem to manage to actually stop these alleged terror attacks? Without any evidence, the MSM endlessly repeated bin Laden, bin Laden, bin Laden, bin Laden like a crazy mantra after 9/11. Despite the fact that bin Laden himself denied involvement in the attacks, and that in the end was never formally charged by the FBI. Was there ever really a bin Laden? You know, what do we have of bin Laden, really? We have a few photos of him. I think there's a famous photo of him with, who is it, either Rumsfeld or Cheney. You know, they're over there training the Taliban, and he's part of it. And we've got some kind of a story that he was this rich Saudi playboy who somehow became disgusted with gross materialism and was going to become a Wahhabist freedom fighter and all that stuff. You know, was there even somebody called Osama bin Laden? I mean, was he just a creation? You see, we have to get into these layers. I mean, you don't have to get into it. You can just live your life. You can just turn this program off right now if you want to. But if you have any kind of interest in this is kind of where we have to go. Because what we're scraping away here, you know, with the sandpaper of discernment, is the whole nature of reality. And how it's all scripted. It's all scripted. Think about that. Just for a second. And we'll go deeper into this. Have you ever seen pictures of Osama bin Laden and Obama? Now, I'm not saying that Obama is Osama bin Laden, but it's kind of interesting when you see the two of them together. It's just a little interesting. Have you ever seen the pictures of Maitreya and Obama? Now, there's an interesting match. There's a totally interesting match with Maitreya and Obama. And I'll never forget, when Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize, there was this blue spiral that was seen in the sky in Norway. And that blue spiral had been connected to Maitreya. I thought, that's interesting. Isn't that interesting? Okay, let's see. Let's keep going here. Have you ever wondered why many of the patsies or sorry deranged mass shooters are Muslim? That's changed, but we'll continue with this. That wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that the Zionist government and the MSM are trying to paint all Muslims as crazy and scary, would it? Nothing like a good dose of Islamophobia to take your freedom away. Absolutely. Absolutely. But now it's changing. Now we've got patsies on the left. We used to have them on the right. Now we've got them on the left. False flag formula, number 5. Patsy has no military training yet shoots extremely fast and accurately. That's the big one. That is the big one. Adam Lanza, who really, I believe, is his brother. If you look at Adam Lanza, number 1, he's supposed to have Asperger's. Number 2, he looks like an alien. He looks like he probably couldn't even pick up a mop, a wet mop, and do anything resembling any kind of damage with even a wet mop. And so we're supposed to believe that Adam Lanza had access to all these weapons, right? I mean, he's supposed to have a treasure trove of weapons and repeater rifles and long guns and pistols. Where the hell does Adam Lanza get that stuff? Is it his rich father, Peter, who's involved in huge international finance? Did he buy him all those weapons? His mom, Adam, what would you like for your birthday? Well, Mom, I'd really like a Kalashnikov. Okay, let me see if I can get that for you, son. Where did he get them? And how does he become proficient at shooting and firing those? You ever fire a weapon? You ever fire a weapon and reload a weapon? It is not easy. Unless you got all the clips and everything together and bang, 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 bang. That takes a lot of training. Tons of training. And if you look at Sandy Hook, not a single person theoretically got wounded to the point where they went to the hospital and recovered and told a story. So that meant that Adam Lanza had the ability to go in and do a perfect hit. Totally clean. Do you know who does stuff like that? And I'm not saying that this is what happened, but people that are trained by intelligence agencies, or people that are trained through the Navy SEALs or the Rangers. I mean, these are the people that do stuff like that. Or you get people from Blackwater who are, Z or whatever they're calling themselves now. They changed their name about 3 times. But they've had the training. Or, it's like, what's the place down here in Texas? I mean, these are the people that could go in and do something like that. Not some kid who could barely lift up a wet mop, has Asperger's, and there's like 2 or 3 pictures of it, so he doesn't really exist. And even if he did, he wouldn't be able to do anything. And yeah, it's a perfect hit. Perfectly clean hit. Killed over 20 people, left absolutely nobody injured or wounded. Yeah, so this is what they say here. Another element of the false flag formula is the skilled and lethal patsy. According to the official narrative of false flag ops like Sandy Hook and Aurora, we were supposed to believe that the skinny and non-muscular youths without any discernible military training were able to acquire expensive military gear, including armor, guns, ammunition, more, wear that gear without getting bogged down in speed, and shoot incredibly fast and accurately. Absolutely. I broke down what happened in Columbine, South Carolina with Dylan Roof. And the amount of time that he had inside of that church, that closed-door church, where people were worshiping, right? And if you look at, I did the map on this thing. I looked at that church on a map. And I looked at how far the nearest police station was. And it was less than 3 miles away. Less than 3 miles away. And the response time for that church would have been probably about 5 to 10 minutes max. And do you think you can just go into a church with a bunch of guns and start shooting and be done in about 10 minutes? I mean, it's not just a false flag. It's like a fast food false flag. It's in and out, right? There's no way he can do that. I mean, think about this. People will be hiding. I mean, if you're in a situation like that, what are you doing? You're hiding under a pew. You're not saying a damn word. And what does he do? Going up and down and looking under each and every pew. Who's there? It's me, the big bad wolf. What pew are you in? So then what? He's going to fire into all the pews and just, that would be like the next thing to do, right? Fire into all the pews. Do you ever see a church pew? You ever see how thick that wood is? If you're underneath one of those church pews, it's pretty good cover. Like, you would have to shoot in the same place over and over again for about 3 or 4 times to kind of break through. Most of them are oak. Really hard oak. And they've got varnish. And, so just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. For a kill like that in South Carolina, with 8 or 9 people, scrambling around, hiding, it would take more than roughly 10 minutes. Trust me on this. Not that I have any real knowledge of skulking around a church with firearms. Yeah, that's what I do. I go to churches on Sunday, and I go, man, if I came in here, how long would it take me to wipe out about 30 people? What kind of caliber would I need? No. It doesn't work. I'm sorry. The math does not work. You ever go inside a church and sing? You ever listen how resonant sounds are inside of a church? They're like echo chambers. You fire 2 or 3 shots in a church, you're going to hear those shots for at least a half a mile to a mile away. And Dylan Roof, and he's like right in there. You know, the guy looks like he can barely lift up a wet mop. Okay, let's keep going here. Let me go back to this. I got a little sidetracked. I'm going to read the whole thing over. Sorry, I got into my... Another element of the false flag formula is the skilled and lethal patsy. According to the official narrative of false flag apps like Sandy Hook and Aurora, we are supposed to believe that skinny and non-muscular youths without any discernible military training were able to acquire expensive military gear, including armor, guns, ammunition, more, wear that gear without getting bogged down in speed, and shoot incredibly fast and accurately. In San Bernardino, we were supposed to believe that a young mother was strong enough and skilled enough to participate in killing 14 and injuring 17 people while she strapped up with the body armor and holding heavy weaponry. In these cases and more, the official story would have you believe that it's no big deal or just a coincidence that the patsy can acquire all this high-end gear, and use it so well. Exactly. False flag formula number 6, patsy gets killed, drugged, or suicided. It is also part of the false flag formula to ensure that the patsy, who is earmarked before the event to take the fall, cannot speak out to rashly defend themselves. This is achieved in a number of ways. The simplest is to have the patsy kill himself or herself by committing suicide. Of course. Another favorite way is to take the patsy out in a thrilling high-speed chase, which has the added benefit of drawing clueless people in through the MSM and gushingly promoting the police state. Sometimes a patsy is killed in plain sight, just because it's so important to suppress the testimony, i.e., or e.g. the Oswald in the JFK assassination. The third way is to mind control and drug the patsy to such an extent that they become a zombie, vegetable unable to articulate anything, as was the case with James Holmes. I will put it forward that James Holmes, or the James Holmes that we saw in Aurora, is not the James Holmes who was the computer genius. It's a different guy. Sorry. And this is a pretty good piece, but what they're leaving out is that there is no patsy, and that the patsy itself doesn't really exist. Okay, here we go. False flag formula number 7, Shooter Lee's manifesto. See, that's what's interesting about the Dylan Roof thing. Dylan Roof is alive. Dylan Roof is, he pled guilty in his case. I don't know what's going on with Dylan Roof. But it's like journalists or reporters should have access to that guy. Like, what was going through your mind when you did this, Dylan? And line up the facts. Nobody has interviewed Dylan Roof. And Dylan Roof should be interviewed. Nobody's done it. And he's one of the few that have actually remained alive. False flag formula number 7, Shooter Lee's manifesto. In this day and age, writing the manifesto is a strange and anachronistic thing to do, yet for some strange reason, shooters' manifestos seem to crop up an awful lot after mass shootings. Conveniently for the controllers, these manifestos provide a perfect explanation for the official narrative and help fill in the missing non-existent motive for attack, which probably pushes those on the fence over into believing the government's version of the event. While the manifesto is not an element in every false flag operation, it is present in enough of them to be regarded as part of the false flag formula. Of course, there's the manifesto. Like when I was down in Lafayette 2 years ago, and that guy, supposedly, left, where was it, Georgia or Alabama, where he's from, or Arkansas. I think it might have been Arkansas. Anyway, he's traveling along, and I'm just going to go stop in Lafayette. I don't know why I'm going to stop in Lafayette. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go to the movie theater, and I'm going to go to the film where Amy Schumer's movie is playing, Amy Schumer being Chuck Schumer's niece, and I'm going to go to the movie theater, and I'm going to start shooting people up. And, of course, he had a bit of his manifesto. That had to be, like, the strangest event, because I was in Lafayette, and I was just miles away from that happening. And we were playing baseball. It was a Friday night, and we were playing baseball. And we just keep hearing these sirens go off. It's like, what is going on? And by the time we get back to the hotel, it's like, oh, there was a shooting. The thing that's always interesting about the shootings is that they always happen inside. They're always in a controlled environment. Even if it's a large environment like a concert hall in Manchester. False flag formula number 8, evidence gets conveniently destroyed. Another element of the false flag formula is the deliberate destruction of evidence so the controllers can cover their tracks. In 9/11, the scrap metal and the smoldering ruins of the WTC towers was immediately shipped off to China right from the start. With Sandy Hook, the entire school was demolished in San Bernardino. The supposed landlord and supposed shooters actually allowed MSM reporters into the suspect's house to poke around and touch all their stuff in complete disregard of what could be a possible crime scene. Could it get any more blatant? False flag formula number 9, no obvious motive for the attack. Have you ever wondered why there is no obvious motive in any of these mass shootings? Crime is supposed to be solved on the merit of motive and opportunity, yet, to hide the reality of a false flag op, the MSM lies about the motive part and chalks it up to a deranged shooter. Other times we are offered up the flimsiest of motives, such as people going on an all-out rampage because they had a grievance with a coworker. In San Bernardino, we were told the young mother with a 1-year-old child was aggressive and psychotic enough to help kill 14 and injure 17 people at the risk of never seeing her child again. Meanwhile, the real purveyors of these operations profit immensely from the ensuing fear, yet some of the majority of the people don't seem to see that motive. False flag formula number 10, immediate calls for gun control. Always. Gun control is obviously one of the key agendas behind all these false flag mass shootings. Since a disarmed population is far easier to exploit and manipulate than an armed one, it is an obvious aspect of the false flag formula. Sometimes gun control is even pushed in the immediate aftermath of the event when people are still highly emotional and in a suggestible state. Take a look at the behavior of Andy Parker, who we were told was the father of a victim killed in the Virginia mass shooting of 2015. It wasn't a mass shooting. It was his daughter and, the camera guy or the producer of the show, the segment. That's about it, right? Within hours of hearing the news of the death of the child, Parker had already contacted and talked with the governor of Virginia and then appeared on TV saying he'd be devoting his entire life to gun control. In a similar fashion, Richard Martinez, the alleged father of the Santa Barbara mass shooting victim, appeared on TV right after his death, angrily pleading for more gun control. In both cases, the political agenda of gun control angrily dominated their reactions rather than grief or other emotions. Absolutely. And where are these guys now? Where's Richard Martinez now? Where is Andy Parker now? And Richard Martinez, I mean, that guy, I mean, and the whole idea, I mean, if you watch the two of them, and you go back in time, and it was the same kind of energy that Mark Kloss, the father of Polly Kloss, had. It's just, it's just cold, steely, anger, and it's like there's no grief involved. And a lot of people say, well, this is what happens, and it's like, I don't know. If something happened to somebody I loved, and I was close to, I'd probably take some time out to really try to understand what happened and to go through some emotions. And when it's all said and done, I would speak out, and I would be really clear about what was going on, and then my anger, which would probably at that time be a bit transformed to something lucid and clear, then I would get into it. But it's almost as if there is some, I mean, I don't know. If you lost a son or a daughter, like these two guys did, wouldn't you just be devastated? Wouldn't you just be cratered? I don't think Richard Martinez lost anybody. I don't. And maybe Andy Parker's daughter was that young woman. I don't think she's dead. I don't think she died. Sorry. I don't think it happened. I think she's probably living in South America somewhere, or she's been recast into some other role. Speaking of roles, false flag formula number 11, fake victims equals crisis actors. The above 10 points are a useful outline for the false flag formula as it pertains to mass shootings with real victims, where real people die. I'm not even sure real people die. Maybe in a hybrid event. Certainly 9/11. Now, I'm going to go back to Columbine, which really kicks all this off in a lot of ways. And I'm not even sure anybody died in Columbine. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm not sure. And we'll get into that and when I talk about Columbine. Okay, here we go. The above 10 points are a useful outline of the false flag formula as it pertains to mass shootings with real victims, where real people die. However, ever since the surreal Sandy Hook event, which still contains many unanswered questions, we have entered the twilight zone of the false flag hoax. This is a term used to describe false flag mass attacks where no one dies, where fake bodies, fake blood, and fake victims are used instead. In this way, the entire operation is more tightly controlled and less messy. A hallmark of the false flag hoax is that the authorities never produce a credible piece of evidence showing an actual dead body of a victim. We saw this in Santa Barbara. Whatever they showed as some kind of credible evidence wasn't credible at all. What looked like a body, what looked like, what's his name? Elliot Rodger. Remember Elliot Rodger's videotapes and how pissed off he was because he wasn't getting laid? Oh my God. You couldn't see anybody in that event. And what they were actually trying to show or portray as blood looked fake. Bodies under yellow blankets, which didn't really even look like bodies. I mean, the whole thing was just completely dubious. Let's keep going here. This is a term used to describe false flag attacks where no one dies, where fake bodies, fake blood, and fake victims are used instead. In this way, the entire operation is more tightly controlled and less messy. A hallmark of the false flag hoax is that the authorities never produce a credible piece of evidence showing an actual dead body of a victim. The following 5 points relate to false flag hoaxes, and specifically to the people employed to pull them off. Crisis actors. It is a truly testament to just how utterly fake our normal world is, the matrix, that false flag ops have now descended to the level where we have to question whether the event even happened at all. And this is the crux of all of it. This is the crux of all of it. Because I can go down about 6 or 7 pieces of so-called reality, and I can give you examples where each and every one of them are mediated and moderated to show you that we are living in a synthetic domain. Now, I'm not sure if we're living in some kind of computerized test model, although that could actually be very true and clear, and certainly there's enough high strange to promote that idea. One of my buddies, Patrick, the finance guy, sent me an email today. Let me read you just a little bit of this email. I don't think he would mind me reading this. Patrick's been on the show before, and you could check out his website, Citizen Zen, I believe is his website. I just got to read this. We're just going to break this. He's a guy that gets into this whole sovereign piece and natural law and common law, and he's untangling his name and all that stuff. And look, he's an Aries, right? So it's like, hats off to you, brother. So here we go. I'm going to read this. This is good. This gets back to the whole kind of matrix reality. He says, I just went to court yesterday. I watched the fractals collapse in themselves some more. Universe was winking almost the whole way. I wore purple and polo and jeans with ruby red sneakers. Why did I quickly sit down at the back pew of court only to realize I sat next to the only other 2 people with purple on, let alone color in that room. They were both black men, one an attorney for the other, and me, white with white stripes on my purple polo. It's a gift from Wife's Work Corporation. It's like the 3 wise men or some shiz sitting there, except I thought I was ritualizing Jesus this go-round, ? Ultimately, I spoke with the presiding judge, who appointed the director of courts to assist me. What's his name? Director Fox, F-O-X. Director 666. Are you kidding me? Universe? No. It says back, let me show you how far it goes. I couldn't find his office. Found his extension, though, to call to find it. His extension, the extension form, 5666. Are you serious? I learned state courts don't have the power to hear men. Boy, was that moment so crystal clear. Only federal courts do it. I also see how I'm supposed to be in these courtrooms. Anyway, this is what he says to me. He says, this experience is a liquid mirror, brother. I know there are external structures to the internal experiences, but the main thing for me the past few months is unseen produces seen, so the structure is seen, still tied to the unseen. I absolutely agree with that 100%. So I thought I would just share that with you. I thought that was an interesting little share in a moment of time, because what we're talking about here is the nature of reality. And what the false flags are doing, in some ways, is very instructive. All right, so here's what I was talking about. Give me 6 things, any 6 things, and I'll share with you how mediated and modulated and moderated they are. Let's start with something simple. What about food? GMOs. What about water? Fluoride. Lithium. What about sports? Fixed games. Fixed officiating. What about cars? Well, did you know that in Europe, if you buy a Volkswagen in Europe, it'll get you 75 miles per gallon. In the United States, that same Volkswagen, you'll get 35 miles per gallon. 2 separate realities. Somebody's mediating one of them, or both. You could just go down any single piece of our experience, any plank of our experience. Parenting. Yeah, even parenting. Our synthetic nature gets involved with parenting sometimes. And those are called our programs, our loops, and our tapes that get into how we relate with our children. Sometimes it's not even us. It's who we were when we were 7 years old, or 10 years old, or 13 years old. All right, let's keep going here. There are organizations of crisis actors in the U.S., such as IIF, and there was clear evidence. Crisis actors were used at Sandy Hook, Boston Marathon, and many others. Government officials have been caught using the word actor to describe various players in these dramas. The MSM has even resorted to calling them actors, too. It was one of the buzzwords at the recent San Bernardino mass shooting. False flag formula number 12, victims get killed twice. The surreal quality of the false flag hoax reached a point of absurdity when it was discovered that one of the victims was reportedly killed twice. We were told that Noah Posner was one of the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting, yet his picture was also among those killed in a Pakistan Taliban attack. Apparently, the recycling of fake victims is another part of the false flag formula. False flag formula number 13, families of victims have elite or acting backgrounds. Is it just a coincidence that the families of mass shooting victims have either elite or acting backgrounds? At the Sandy Hook event, local CEO of the Newtown Bank, John Trinacosta, whose house was next to the Lanzas and had a lot of unusual activity occurring the day of Sandy Hook, was connected to the New York Federal Reserve, and thus the international banking elite. Francine Wheeler was formerly personal assistant of former Chief Democratic National Committee fundraiser Maureen White, whose husband Stephen Ratner is a Wall Street investment banker and a member of the Rockefeller CFR, Council on Foreign Relations. It is also noteworthy at Sandy Hook how acting showed up in the resumes of so many of the key players there. Gene Rosen, David and Francine Wheeler, both professional actors, and others who all had a background in acting. Father of Virginia mass shooting, Andy Parker, is an actor, and a politician too. This fact supports the idea that another element false flag formula to watch for people with elite connections and in acting backgrounds. Richard Martinez. I wanted to slap that guy. False flag formula number 14. Families of victims show little or no emotion and even snigger and laugh. That's all part of it, by the way. That is all part of it. They do that on purpose. That is not them being caught off camera. Luckily for truth seekers, the majority of crisis actors using these false flag events are poor actors who are utterly unconvincing in the roles they play. I think it's on purpose. The majority display little or no emotion after an alleged tragedy like losing a family member, child to a random and violent mass shooting. It is true that humans do vary widely with emotional response and expression. However, with many of the crisis actors, judging by their reactions, it simply strains credibility too much to believe that they have just been through a harrowing and traumatic ordeal. Absolutely. Given the range of possible reaction to a tragedy like losing a loved one in a mass shooting, what are the chances that many of the victims or family members are so non-emotional or so understanding or so quick to forgive? It's true. The quick to forgive part is part of the new religion. That's another discussion. It's shameful enough that the crisis actors playing these roles are perpetrating monumental deception on the public, tugging at the average person's heartstrings solely to trick them. That's a crime, if you ask me. It's a total crime. And why is it a total crime? Because then we are emoting and reacting to synthetic situations. I mean, if this is a simulacrum of reality, or a level of reality, and let's say this level of reality, this simulated reality, needs emotion, because it has no emotion, that it's devoid of emotion, that the actual false flags themselves are the things that extract the emotion from us to feed into an emotionless void or matrix that now has a type of fuel to further its own synthetic growth. Think about that for a moment. That if there is this domain, this synthetic domain that's being created, a simulacrum of this reality, which is probably a simulacrum of another reality, that it needs emotional investment. And it's through these false flags, at a mass level, that it begins to be watered by the emotions of our own human experience. Yes. It's shameful enough that the crisis actors playing these roles are perpetrating the monumental deception on the public, tugging at the average person's heartstrings slowly to trick them. However, on top of that, these actors have the gall to actually laugh, to smile, to snigger and giggle while pulling off their atrocious stunts. The only conclusion to draw from this is that it must be pretty funny to get a paid gig like this, fooling millions of people. False flag formula number 15, families of victims receive millions in federal payoffs. In the U.S., the land of the lawsuit, people are generally pretty fast to initiate a lawsuit if they feel they've been wronged. It is highly strange, therefore, that none of the alleged events of the Sandy Hook event, parents of the Sandy Hook event, decided to sue the government for negligence or to demand redress for any other grievance. Additionally, many alleged parents received a total of millions in unsolicited federal payouts. Check out the free houses they magically got on Christmas Day 2009. That's a Wolfgang Halbig discovery. That's right, unsolicited. The federal government just gave it over to them without asking. Ask yourself, is it more likely the government just do this out of the goodness of its heart, or that the money was more like a bribe, blackmail, payout, all rolled into one, awarded to the actors playing a part in a role and being sworn to silence? Conclusion. Use the 15 elements of the false flag formula to be more aware. These are 15 elements I noticed forming the false flag formula. There may be more. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Meanwhile, use the knowledge you have for the false flag formula to become more aware, wise, and hip to the deception, so that the next time it unfolds, as it surely will, you will be among those that spot the fakery, rather among those who are too scared, shell-shocked, and gullible to do anything other than buy the official narrative. Makia Freeman, which is probably not a real name, is the editor of the Freedom articles and the senior researcher at toolsforfreedom.com. You can go there and you can read more, I believe, from Makia Freeman. So this is I've been working off of a Waking Times article from December 18th, 2015, the false flag formula. So what I want to do now is I want to get into Columbine for a little bit. Let's see if I can go back in time here. Let's see here. Here's a list, the ever-growing list of the false flag attacks. I'll go from number 1, Japanese troops set off a small explosion on a train track in 1931 and falsely blamed it on China to justify an invasion of Manchuria. This is known as the Mukden incident or the Manchurian incident. Number 2, we have Major of the Nazi SS admitted at the Nuremberg trials. Under orders of the chief of the Gestapo, he and some other Nazi operatives faked attacks on their own people and resources, which they blamed on the Poles to justify the invasion of Poland. Number 3, minutes of the high command by the Italian government subsequently proved by Mussolini himself admitted that violence on the Greek-Albanian border was carried out by Italians, falsely blamed on the Greeks as an excuse for Italy's 1940 invasion of Greece. Number 4, Nazi General Franz Halder also testified at the Nuremberg trials that Nazi leader Hermann Göring admitted to setting fire to the German Parliament building in 1933 and then falsely blaming the communists for the arson. That was the Reichstag, right? It's kind of the mother of all the false flags. Israel admits that in 1954, an Israeli terrorist cell operating in Egypt planted bombs in several buildings, including the U.S. diplomatic facilities, then left behind evidence implicating the Arabs as the culprits. One of the bombs detonated prematurely, allowing the Egyptians to identify the bombers, and several of the Israelis confessed later. That's the King David Hotel. Let's see, that's, okay, then we have the British government admits that between 1946 and 1948 it bombed 5 ships carrying Jews attempting to flee the Holocaust to seek safety in Palestine, and set up a fake group called Defenders of Arab Palestine, then had the pseudo-group falsely claim responsibility for the bombings. Ooh, what a twisted web we weave. What else do we have here? Let's move up. Okay, in the 60s, everything really takes off. We have the murder of the Turkish Prime Minister in 1960, the bombings of Portugal in 1966, the Plaza Fontana massacre in Italy in 1969, terror attacks in Turkey in 71, the Patano bombing in Italy in 72, shootings in Brescia, Italy, and a bombing in an Italian train in 74. And it goes on and on and on in Europe in the 70s. Boy, look at that. I could do like 10 shows on this. Wow, tons of stuff. Let's go to Columbine. Let's go to Columbine. Here we go. Okay. Now, if you remember, Columbine took place on April 20th, 1999. That's 420, by the way. 420. Now, I'm not a huge Dallas Goldbug fan, but he did some great work on Columbine. And one of the things that he was able to point out was that there was a significant lack of blood. Now, Columbine happened, it'll be 20 years in 2 years. 20 years. And one of the things about this, if you go back in time and you look at, here we go. This is from liveleak.com. Let me see if I can. This is where are the Columbine victims. You should go, let's go, let me see if I can, how long is this video? It says a search for the victims of the 1999 Columbine massacre and official records yield some shocking results. There aren't any. One of the first complete no-motive school massacres ever staged, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were supposed to have embarked on a gunning down of 12 students and a teacher, only to shoot themselves. For 15 years, most people have accepted this as the real event. Now, the fact that an FBI agent's son of the lead investigation case, no less, helped the Klebold and Harris team to make a film about bombing the inside of the school prior to the shooting, of course, makes much more sense. And the fact that one of the victims also worked with them in acting in plays also makes more sense. I'm not going to play this because I haven't vetted it yet. Maybe I'll play it on Monday. But what we're looking at here with Columbine is that if Columbine, if we look at the nature of the false flag and what we've been staring down with Sandy Hook and San Bernardino and all these other events, then why wouldn't Columbine also be a false flag? Okay, I'm going to play the video. I haven't downloaded it. Let me just see how long it is. Hold on. Let me see what we got here. Here we go. I'll read you the narrative here. Something shocking happens when one tries to find the victims of Columbine, located in Jefferson County, Colorado. You type in the names and the years, and the exact date and location. This is found by Matt Ketchum, called the Undead of Columbine. And the Social Security Death Index, and nobody shows up. 0 matches. 0 matches. So the question here is, what happened? Well, some of the death records are present. They seem to have no connection to Jefferson County or even the United States. Yeah, so I'm going to put this link inside of the. I'm going to put the link inside the show page, and I'll put it on YouTube so that you can watch this video. Essentially, what this guy Matt Ketcher is saying is that nobody died at Columbine, and I am in agreement with that. And for a long time, I held the idea that this whole thing took place. And I remember when Columbine first came out, and I was thinking, oh yeah, well look at these two guys. They were, both of them were high on Luvox, and they were high on Ritalin, and this is what these drugs do to kids. They turn them into killers, and then there were a bunch of other different angles. That the trench coat mafia were all Jewish, and they went after all the Christian kids. And then there was the whole FBI connection, because and there was a trench coat mafia at Columbine. They were goths, right? That's what they were. And one of the kids who was a senior and part of the trench coat mafia, his father was the FBI regional head there at Columbine. And it's like, wow, this is crazy, So, and then, of course, they had all the emergency services there ready to go, and all, it was all like lined up, right? And if we were to have Columbine today, I guarantee you, it would be looked at as a false flag versus this singular event that took place in 1999, kind of, in the sort of in the pre-2000 false flag reality space. Now, another interesting thing around Columbine, and this one's pretty easy to track down. is that Klebold and Harris are actually Trey Stone and Matt Parker, who went to Columbine High School. And I think they've actually kind of poked fun of that. So it's an interesting connection. You can play with that one if you like. But if we go back to Columbine, it's pretty doubtful that anybody really died there. But something took place, and we were sold, again, this version of the false flag, this version. And if you think about it, Bill Clinton was still president at that point in time. George Bush would take over a little over a year after that. Maybe a little less than a year after that. Anyway, but that fits into sort of the Clinton model of a false flag, which is always about taking away guns. And what's really interesting, too, about this is that over time, the United States government got involved in ammo sales. So whenever there was a false flag, guns and ammo sales went off the charts because people think, well, they're going to take away the guns. They're going to take away the guns. We better buy some more guns. We better buy some more bullets. So the federal government was making a lot of money during these false flags. It was a way to adrenalize their own business interests and to create more fear and ultimately to suck the emotion out of us so that we can ultimately fuel a synthetic reality. I think ultimately that's what it's about. And whatever ancillary kinds of impact that they would have on us immediately. Let's see if we got in the chat room. We got some people in the chat room here. Let's see, audio sporadic. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the audio. Sorry, it's I've got my levels up. Sorry about that, James. I'm watching my levels. They look good. I can hear it. So if there's sporadic audio, it's going to be on Spreaker's end. This is why I left. This is why I left Blog Talk, by the way. I mean, I'm looking right into my and he says problem still. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. The good thing about Blog Talk is I could talk to somebody real time, and they would listen. Oh yeah, this problem. Audio is good now. I don't know what happened. Okay. How long ago was that? 12/28. Shoot, a long time ago. Audio is good now. I don't know, boys and girls. Well, we've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit here and trying to understand the nature of the false flag and what it means for us ultimately. And it's a mirror reality. It is a mirror of a mirror of a mirror in our reality. In my personal opinion, is that they're there ultimately to extract emotion from us. And the extraction of the emotion. I wonder if this has to do with the fact that I think I get it now. Yes, I get it now. I understand why the audio is an issue. And it's nothing to do with me, it's the interface. When I go off of the interface and I go onto a website and I start reading off a website, I'm going to need to get two computers. Actually, I do have two computers. Anyway, let's get back to what I'm getting at here. I think ultimately these events are being done to extract emotion from us so that our emotion can fuel an emergent synthetic reality, that we're almost seeding it. David Wilcock talks about loosh, and loosh, that's a whole concept from Robert Monroe and Far Journeys, and Monroe gets out of his body and he sees there's this creation of this material called loosh. And James says the Russians. I have no beef with the Russians. I have no beef at all. I've never had a beef with the Russians. Not even as a kid. I don't know, maybe for a minute during the 1972 Olympics. But that's about it. Other than that, let live and let live. From Russia with love. So anyway, just getting back to wrapping all this up. That's what I think is going on. I think it's the extraction of emotion to fill an emergent synthetic reality that has no emotion. That's my sense. All right, so why don't we wrap this up? We're about an hour and 30 into it, which is about the right time for the Friday FARcast. I'll be back on Sunday as the powers that be try to hack my media once again over on YouTube with the live stream. I'll be back there. And next Friday, of course, the last Friday of every month, we'll bring on my friend Stephen Creamy, the publisher of Logo Sophia, an author and all-around bright guy. We'll be on together for an hour, 45 minutes or so, and I'll just see. We might talk about this series called American Gods, which is pretty interesting. And we kicked around this idea of the new mythology, and we'll see if that fits into the bucket of the new mythology. And Stephen always has some really interesting and insightful and bright ways of looking at the universe. All right, so why don't we get out of here? Have a great weekend, and forget the false flags. Do your best to live within the realm of your own sovereign domain. And if you somehow puncture through and are living in some other surreal simulacra, and the fractals show themselves and you realize what you're in, just chuckle and laugh, observe and enjoy the spectacle, as it were. And it's always a good perspective to take. In the meantime, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to the Friday FARcast. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys back here on Sunday night not here, over on YouTube for the live stream, and Monday for 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm out of here.
Okay, let's do it.